So in past videos, I have said that you should never paint quickset. Now I never went on to explain why, and I think part of the reason is this was just old drywaller lore that I had heard while being on the Drywall Talk forum way back in the day. The common understanding is that when you paint quickset, it can flash really badly. So what that means, that's where you have like a different color between your painted wall surface and the painted quickset mud. So basically if you do like a 1 foot patch on a wall, you'll end up seeing this totally different sheen across the quickset. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, I have seen things like this in the past, but I was just so wary from that information that I never tried it. So I decided to set out and make a video that would either prove me right or prove that old theory wrong. And honestly, the results surprised me. So what I did was I skim coated the wall twice with quickset mud. This is Hamilton brand, definitely my preferred mud. And I chose to paint it with 3 different paints to try to narrow down what could possibly cause flashing. So I used a primer sealer. So this is a heavy duty sealer that's meant to, block stains and do all that kind of stuff. It is a latex based one. I didn't use any like shellac or oil based sealers. I also used just regular drywall primer. So that stuff is intended to prime new drywall and mud, but not necessarily seal in stains. And the last thing I used was just a, generic paint and primer. This is the Cloverdale Super 2. This would be comparable to something like, I would say it's comparable to Regal from Benjamin Moore. It's not as high quality as like Aura. Anyways, I gave a couple of coats of paint over top of everything and the results surprised me. So from about halfway up, I used the drywall primer with 2 coats of the Super 2, just 2 top coats, right? From about halfway down to the quarter-way mark, I used the 1, 2, 3 primer sealer plus 2 coats of the Super 2. And from about quarter-way down, I used just 2 coats of the Super 2 paint and primer. So let's get a glancing light across here and I'll show you guys what I was able to see. So from about halfway up, it all looks perfect. There was nothing to see. I mean, we got some slight ridging just from my poor sanding of quickset, which is why I like using all-purpose because it sands easier, but nothing, no flashing. If we look from back here, trying to see if we can see a sheen difference, there's nothing. So the primer sealer actually gave me the worst results. Right after priming it, you could definitely see that the hot mud had a bluish hue. That is majorly flashing compared to the painted surface. And then if we go down a little further to the paint and primer, all of a sudden it looks great again. We're not seeing that flashing there. The paint and primer is totally fine, handling it like a champ. Now, I wonder if that had less to do with it being a primer sealer and more to do with this having less pigment in it. Like the other paints, they seem to have a little bit more kind of blacks and gray tones to them that seem to cover a little bit better. Whereas this one paints on really bright white. And I think maybe the bluish color of a bright white, I mean like a stark white, might have been enhancing the color of the quickset. And I think with 1 more coat, like if I did 3 top coats, I could actually get that to totally disappear and the sheen and color to be exactly the same. But yeah, the primer sealer, the one you would think would do the best, actually did the worst. So some of these ridges are actually just from 2 layers of quickset and having an uneven sanding in between and the fact that it doesn't sand nicely. So that's what some of that is, but it does help you actually pick up on that kind of bluish hue. And then right about here is where it stops. And it's going to be hard to see on camera, but to my eye, all of a sudden it turns into just the regular cloud white. So again, from here down is just the Super 2. Old reliable Super 2, 2 coats. No problem, no flashing. Well, you guys, those were my results from painting hot mud. It was surprising, and there's a couple things that I took away from this. One of them is you don't know until you know. So in spite of the fact that I had read a bunch of stuff from some old timers and had seen some pretty bad flashing on occasion, without actually trying all of the products that I regularly use, there was no way for me to know whether or not it would flash. I was just being cautious. So I'm very pleasantly surprised to see that, yeah, I can definitely paint hot mud. Now there is a little disclaimer here. So it could vary greatly depending on your locally available products and what you decide to use. So just because the primer sealer failed in this instance and the sort of run-of-the-mill paint and primer did such a good job with, you know, just 2 coats, like there's no guarantees that that's going to be the same for you with your locally available hot muds and paint and primers. I have often caught flack in the comments for using, you know, a kind of generic paint and primer instead of a sealer. But I've been using this stuff for a few years. I'll paint right over top of big patches on walls, no primer, sealer, nothing, and I've never had problems. But to tell you guys that every paint and primer is gonna work over any type of hot mud would be total misinformation and a little delusional of me to think so. But the one thing I can say is I'm no longer going to be saying you shouldn't paint over top of hot mud. So the one thing I would say for sure is that it caused me some grief with the ridging. I'm definitely going to continue only top coating and painting with regular air drying muds, but that's just personal preference. If for some reason you think that using hot mud is actually getting you ahead and helping your jobs work better, carry on. I'm not gonna say you shouldn't do that or you shouldn't paint it ever again because I've proven myself wrong and I'm quite pleasantly surprised at that. Anyways, there's really no more that needs to be said here. Yeah, I'm stoked to learn something new instead of just repeating the same old stuff that somebody else told me. Anyways, thanks for watching Vancouver Carpenter. I hope you guys got something out of this. And as always, I hope your project's going well, but I hope you're doing even better. Till the next one, you guys.